Mind Power, abridged by William Walker Atkinson. The universe is a great organism, controlled by a dynamism of the psychical order. Mind gleams through its every atom. There is mind in everything, not only in human and animal life, but in plants, in minerals, in space. Flammario. I hold that this energy, or force, or dynamic principle, is no respecter of persons. Its service, like that of the sun and rain, and all natural forces, is open to all, just and unjust, good and bad, high and low, rich and poor. It responds to the proper efforts, no matter by whom exerted, or for what purpose called into effect. But the proper effort must be exerted, consciously or unconsciously, else there will be no operation of the force. I believe that the activities of this dynamic mental principle are intimately correlated to manifestations of the mental operations known to us as desire, will, and imagination. Mind power is very far from being a blind, mechanical energy. It is a living, mental force, which I hold is behind the manifestations of physical energy and mechanical force. It is not the physical energy of science, but is something of the nature of a living will, which is rather the cause of physical energy, than identical with it. Let us take a familiar example. You desire to move your hand, and it moves. Why? Because of the manifestation of the wonderful and mysterious force called will, which is stored up within you, and which you have released to move the hand. Mind power is an actual living force. It is the force that makes plants grow, and animal bodies grow, and which enables all living things to move and act. It is the force which enables the growing mushroom to raise up the slabs of paving stone, or causes the roots of a tree to split open the great boulders, into the crevices of which they have crept. Some of the lower forms of organic life, so-called, possess no organs, and are but masses of jelly-like matter without signs of even rudimentary organs, and yet these life forms show evidences of desire, choice, and will. Mind power exists everywhere, and is manifest in every activity of the universe. In every activity of the universe? You say, surely you do not include physical activity and energy such as natural forces etc. Yes, I do mean just that. How can that be? You ask, what has mind power to do with electricity, light, heat, magnetism? Here it is in a nutshell. All forms of natural physical energy, or forces, known as light, heat, electricity, magnetism, etc., are held by science to be forms of energy arising from the vibration of the particles of matter. Now what causes the vibration? Motion of the particles, of course. And what causes the particles to move? Just this, the attraction and repulsion existing between them. And what causes the particles to exhibit this attraction and repulsion toward each other? Now here is where we get to the heart of the matter. Listen well. We have seen that the particles are attracted to, or repelled by, each other, in the matter of likes and dislikes, love and hate, or pleasure or revulsion, or comfortable and uncomfortable experiences related, however distant, to sensation, etc. And these attractions and repulsions are held to result from capacity to experience sensations and the power to respond to sensations. And both the power to receive and experience sensations, and to respond thereto, are manifestations of mentality, which Haeckel has compared to desire and will. And if mentality is the cause of the sensations and of the response there, and the latter are the causes of the attractions and repulsions, and the latter are the causes of the motion, to and fro, of the particles of matter, and the latter, in turn is the cause of the vibrations, and the vibrations are the causes of the manifestations of light, heat, electricity, magnetism, etc. Then am I not justified in claiming that mind and mind power are the motive force of all physical energy? Mentative induction. So mentation means mental activity. Tel, meaning far off, telementation means mental activity at a distance. Feeling the presence of the other atom, the first atom moves towards its affinity, voluntarily, and just as you move your arm or walk, the atom probably exerting a push upon the ether which must be to the atom or particle what the air is to the wing of the bird, or the water to the fin of the fish. But there is another cause of motion, as we have seen, the mutual pull of the attracting atoms. There is always a keep your distance, or thus far and no further principle in nature which holds every particle of matter individual and alone. Even the hardest diamond, or piece of steel, is composed of molecules close together but yet separated by this circle of influence, and every molecule is composed of several atoms between which the same law operates, and every atom is composed of many ions or electrons, which have distances between them. It is mind power exerted over the intervening spaces by filamentation that attracts and holds these atoms and molecules in their places, and yet keeps them at their distance. And I believe that the vibrations of mental states, feelings, desires, etc., are transmitted from one mind to another by filamentation, arousing similar states, feelings, desires, etc., in the receiving mind along the lines of what we call induction in physical science. Ascending the scale, we find the crystals building up their forms by drawing material from the fluids in which they are immersed, and then building upon a set pattern and style, as truly as does the builder among the animals or among men. Passing on to the low forms of animal life, we find tiny life forms in the slime of the ocean bed, which are apparently no more than tiny drops of glue, cells without a nucleus, which nevertheless perform the functions of all organic forms, being born, taking nutrition, assimilating, eliminating, growing old, and finally dying, after reproducing their kind by growth and division. But, the point that most concerns us is that although these creatures have no senses, or even rudimentary sense organs, they are aware of the approach of other creatures, and of their food. In some way they become aware of these things. How? Man does not know. Moreover, they are possessed of the power of motion, and exert their will in the direction of moving from place to place. Schools of fish seem to have some method of instantaneous communication between the individual fishes composing them, for the entire school moves from side to side, turning sharply, etc., as if it were possessed of but a single mind. Some scientists have held that many of the lower animals who live in groups, schools, etc., have mental relations similar to those of the colonies of cells which seem to have a common mind. Wild animals undoubtedly have some subtle sense whereby they find each other when separated by long distances. The return of cats and dogs who have been carried miles from home, and the return of birds to their original places, after their migrations, may have a similar explanation. Among the animals we find many instances of the power of charming or fascinating, both of which I hold to be but varying forms of manifestation of mind power in the direction of powerfully influencing the imagination, desire, on will of another by mentative induction. This mental fascination, among the animals, manifests along two lines, viz. 1, along the lines of desire operating in the direction of sex manifestation, such as the winning of mates, etc., and 2, along the lines of will operating in the direction of overcoming the prey of the animal, such as the charming of birds by serpents, or of smaller animals by tigers, etc. It is related by travelers that when one comes suddenly in the presence of a lion, tiger, or leopard, his legs seem paralyzed, and the eyes of the beast seem to exert a peculiar fascination and power over him. I have seen a mouse manifest the same emotion in the presence of a cat, and the same is true of a rat in the presence of a ferret, or similar enemy. Passing on from the lower animal life to the plane of human life, we find on all sides many manifestations of mind power along the lines of filamentation and mentative induction. Now, as never before, is this mighty force being employed for worthy or unworthy purposes in everyday human life. Whether in the form of personal magnetism, or the subtle fascinating charm of one mind over another, that form of mental force that influences as if by an irresistible charm, that bewitches, allures, charms, enchants, attracts, or in what has been called fascination, in which one person is able to influence another by exercising a powerful influence upon his or her affections, emotions, passions or thoughts, or in some of the other similar forms of the exercise of an unseen, inexplicable influence upon others. Certain houses and stores have atmospheres of their own, which are perceptible to those entering them. Back of all the ceremonies, rites, and incantations was the esoteric idea that the will was the real force employed under the mask of incantation and rites assumed to impress the imaginations and minds of the populace. Back of the amulet and charm was the working of the will of the person wearing them, which was called into effect by the faith or imagination, a real power and not a fancy as many believe, of the man ignorant of the real force. What we know in these days as mental suggestions, including that which we now call affirmations or auto-suggestions, were understood and skillfully used by the priests, or magicians, in order to control the people. The same force that is used by the modern healer, when he or she treats a patient for health, success, or some other desirable quality, is the same used by the Black Voodoo, the Congo sorcerer, the Salem witch, the Hawaiian kahuna, who prays people into sickness and death, the medicine man of the American Indian, with his charms and incantations, the wizards and enchanters of the Middle Ages, the practitioner of adverse treatments, or malicious mental magnetism, of the modern cults. The secret is this: the power does not come from the supposed source, but from within the mind of the man employing it. And, still more startling, to the uninitiated, is this statement, which is equally true: the power of the mind of the person affected is the real cause of the effect, rather than the power of the mind of the supposed causer, the latter merely calling into operation the power of the mind of the person affected. But, it may be asked, why do I wish to inform the public about a force, unknown to many, which is capable of evil as well as of good use and results? The answer is simple. Ignorance is no protection against anything, for the knowledge is always possessed of the few who may use it on the ignorant many without suspicion. The greater publicity is given to a thing, and the better it is understood, the better may its good effects be obtained and the less the danger of its improper use. Forewarned is forearmed. Mentative poles. The brain I regard as in the nature of a transformer of the universal mind power, or possibly as a converter of the force into mentation. The brain cannot create mind power. Its office is merely to transform or convert the existent energy into usable forms and phases. The emotive pole and the motive pole. The word motive means that which acts, wills, moves, chooses, controls. The word motive means that which manifests feeling, emotion, agitation, passion, sensation, etc. The emotive pole manifests actively as desire force. The motive pole manifests actively as willpower. Your strong desire force is able to rouse the will of another mind in response thereto. It may likewise set up vibrations in that other mind, awakening the similar desires. Your willpower may arouse desire in the mind of another, and cause action in accordance therewith. It may also overpower the will of another, and lead it captive. Your combined will and desire pouring out in the mentative current may produce a combined effect upon the minds of others by mental induction. Let us think a moment. What part of the mind seems to produce the greatest moving power and strength? Is it not chiefly that region of the mind that produces what we call emotions, feelings, desires, cravings, passions? Does not this part of the mind really cause the greatest incentive action on our part? Is not the whole moving force largely summed up in the two words desire and will? Think of this a moment. Why did you do this thing, and that thing? Is it because you thought about it by cold, logical reasoning, and acted upon the impulse given thereby? Or, was it not because you wanted to do it, desired to do it, felt like doing it? Is not always the feeling or desire precedent to and the originator of the action? And, as for thought, is it not used merely as an instrument to think up the best ways of manifesting the feeling or desire? Think of this, is it not so? Did you ever do a thing, except under compulsion, that you did not desire to do? And was not the desire the preceding cause of your every action? Now, this desire in all of its manifestations has a mighty power of attraction and influence. It manifests as the law of mentative attraction, which is constantly drawing toward us the things we desire, and also drawing us toward them. Not only is this true on the conscious plane, but even on the subconscious. Our desires constitute our nature, and our nature is always operating the mighty power of mentative attraction. The will is the director and controller of the desire force, and upon its training and management depends the powerful use of the latter. I have shown you that desire force is the great force underlying the phenomena of mental magic. But desire force without the aid of the will is like steam unconfined and undirected, and gunpowder fired in the open air, both wasted energy. The will is the lever and director of the great power of desire, and without it, say, the latter is almost inoperative and ineffectual. Their will acts as the arouser, director, restrainer, concentrator, and manager of the great occult force of desire. What is generally known as willpower is often in reality merely desire force strongly concentrated and directed to a focus by the power of the will. The greatest feats of the occult magicians depend upon lamentation operated by trained willpower. When one has so trained his mind to be obedient to his will, that it can be held steady and one-pointed, as the Hindus say, then is he in a position to direct his mentative currents upon others to the best advantage. But so long as his mind is in a stage of disorganization, one faculty pulling this way, and another that way, and so on, he cannot hope to concentrate upon others the force that is being wasted in keeping order at home. When the mind is mastered by the will, then may new territory be conquered. Besides its office as the director of the energy, the will serves the very important office as the restrainer of desire force. Personal magnetism. The magnet, which was originally called the Magian or magic stone, because its force resembled the mentative attraction manifested by the Magi or Magians, serves to give a name to similar manifestation of mental force centuries after. The so-called magnetic man is able to sway audiences or individuals by his mystic power, and one often fails to realize just how it was done when he recalls the words spoken, or reads them in cold type the morning after. Exercises. Exercise I. In order to realize the reality of the statement that you are a center of mind power, you must first enter into a realization of the existence of a great ocean of mind power itself. Do not pass over this lightly, for it is most important. You must begin to create a mental picture of the universe as a great ocean of living mind power, vibrating with life and force and power. Endeavor to make this mental picture so clear that you can see it with your mind's eye, and until it becomes a reality to you. Picture yourself as alone in the universe and surrounded on all sides with a vibrating, pulsating sea of energy, or power. See that power is locked up in that ocean, and that the ocean exists everywhere. Shut out from your mental field all other persons, things or conditions. Imagine yourself as alone in the great ocean of power. You must practice frequently upon this mental picture until you are able to visualize it distinctly. This does not mean that you have to actually see it, just as you do this printed page, but that you should be able to actually feel it. You will begin to understand just what I mean after you have practiced this a little. This great ocean of mind power must become real to you, and you must practice until it does so become. The importance of the above exercise may be understood when I tell you that it will be impossible for you to manifest more than a moderate degree of power until you are able to realize yourself as a real center. Exercise 2. The second exercise, which will tend to increase your vibration as a center of power, is as follows. Picture yourself clearly as a center of power in the mentative ocean. While seeing the ocean on all sides of you, you must see yourself as the center of it. The highest occult teaching informs us that the great mentative ocean has its center everywhere and its circumference nowhere. There are centers so mighty and exalted that the human mind cannot grasp their importance. But even the tiniest point of activity is a center in itself. So hesitate not, but begin to form a mental picture of yourself as a center of power. Practice this exercise until you can clearly feel yourself as a center of power. You must learn to think of yourself as a focal point of force in the great ocean of mind power. I would impress upon you the fact, known to all advanced occultists, that in the measure of your realization of this mighty quality of the ego will be the measure of the power possessed by you. Exercise 3. The third exercise consists in the realization of the nature of the power. You must begin to realize that you have a will which is capable of impressing itself on the things, persons and circumstances of your world, and you must begin to realize that you have a desire which attracts to you the things, people and circumstances of your world, and which, in fact, draws to you the very material from which your world is made. When you realize this dual force within you, it will begin to express itself automatically. The act of realization causes the mental machinery to begin to work smoothly and effectively. Therefore, picture to yourself this dual force within you. See yourself as influencing and acting upon the world around you. See yourself as a power in the land. And also see yourself as an attracting force, drawing to you that which you need and want and require, consciously and unconsciously. Picture yourself as a dynamic individual. Carry with you this thought constantly and repeat it often to yourself, and you will find it a source of power. You will find the power pouring into you when you say or think it. When you feel weak, or when you feel the need of additional power, use this statement of power: I am dynamic. And when you say it, or think it, you must picture to yourself just what you mean by the statement, hence the importance of knowing just what is meant. Do not pass over this statement of power as unimportant, but try it in actual practice and you will realize what a battery of power you have become. Those around you will soon become aware of a new sense of power within you. Don't be a leaner, or a leaning post. Don't lean on anyone else, and don't let anyone lean on you. Mental atmosphere. Persons whose personality is weaker have a mental atmosphere extending only a few inches from their bodies, and which is scarcely perceptible to those coming in contact with them. If you will but get this realization firmly fixed in your mind, you will automatically create for yourself a most positive mental atmosphere that will be felt by all with whom you come in contact. So first, last and all the time, build up this realization. Say to yourself, I am dynamic. Then think it out, dream it out, act it out. And, of course, always realize what all this means. You are the channel through which is pouring the universal willpower, and in the degree that you allow the current to so flow through you, so will be the power you are able to manifest. When you wish to manifest a special degree of power, just let this statement, I am dynamic, flame out in vivid letters in your mind. When you feel that you are being approached by some other person of strong will, whom you do not wish to influence you, just bring this statement into effect, and you will actually see the effect of it upon the other person. In this place, I wish to call your attention to the importance of always maintaining your positivity as a means of mental training. Do not allow yourself to become negative to others, even where there is nothing lost by so doing, for by this neglect you create a negative habit which will cause you trouble to overcome later. If a person comes into your presence and his personality seems likely to dominate or overpower yours, by all means interpose a mental resistance right then and there. Simply look the person in the eye, carelessly and without any special effort, at the same time making the mental statement, I am dynamic. And you will find that your positivity will rise until it is equal with his, and your feeling of negativity will disappear. In exceptional cases you may add mentally, I am more dynamic than you. The gist of the matter is to surround yourself with a mental aura of such a nature that people will act toward you as you wish them to do. An example may help you to get a clearer idea of what I mean, so I herewith give you the same. I know a lady, living in Chicago, who was constantly complaining that people were always running over her on State Street, the crowded retail street of the great western metropolis. She said that they were always crowding her off the sidewalk and pushing, bumping and jostling her in a most annoying manner. She asked me for instructions as to what thought she should use to prevent individuals from so acting. I answered that I did not think it was necessary to consider the separate individuals in the case, but that she should treat the crowd as a whole, by means of a protective mental atmosphere. I then advised her to build up a mental atmosphere around this statement, people respect my rights. They will not unduly impose on me in the street, I deny the power of the crowd to impose on me. And she followed this advice, and in a short time had built up a protective mental atmosphere which acted almost magically upon the crowd, who stepped aside and gave her a full right of way on the pavement. I have said over and over again, and now say it over again another time, that the words of themselves are nothing. The real virtue lies in the feeling behind the words. If there is no feeling, there is no result. In order to get the results, you must erect the framework of words, and then build around it the structure of feeling, and expectation, and visualization. That's the way to do it. The words are merely the skeleton, the flesh and blood are the feelings and materialized visualizations. The kernel of the process of creating the mental atmosphere lies in what is called visualization. Visualization is simply the creation of a strong mental image of the thing desired, the perfecting it each day until it becomes almost as clear as an existing material thing. Then the visualization tends to materialize itself, that is, it begins to build around itself actual material conditions corresponding with the mental framework. The statement of words is the pattern around which the visualized mental images form themselves. And the mental image is the framework around which the actual material conditions form themselves. The thing to do in visualizing is to bring the positive imagination to see and feel the thing as actually existent. Then by constant practice and meditation the mental atmosphere becomes formed, and the rest is all a matter of time. See yourself as you wish to be. See others as you wish them to be. See conditions as you wish them to be. The thing to do in visualizing is to bring the positive imagination to see and feel the thing as actually existent. Then by constant practice and meditation the mental atmosphere becomes formed, and the rest is all a matter of time, and materialization will follow upon visualization, even as visualization followed upon the statement. Channels of influence. Think out part, visualize it, and act it out. In other words, if you wish to convey a suggestive manner of confidence, you must begin to think confidence from morning until night. And you must also begin to visualize confidence when you have the chance to do so. That is, you must make a mental picture of yourself as manifesting confidence. And you must also begin to act out the part. Now about this acting out, I would say that I mean not only the playing the part in your interviews with people, but I also mean an actual series of rehearsals in private, just as you would perform if you were preparing to play a part on the stage, in public. You must form a mental image of how you would look and act if you were filled with confidence, and were approaching people. And also remember this, that in the measure that you throw your mind into the part, so will be your success. When you practice, you must throw your mind into the acting, just as you would if you were in earnest. It is the mind back of it all, remember. Exercise I look into the eyes of your friend, or your own in the mirror, and then say mentally, I am stronger than you. Throw into your glance as much of the feeling of strength as you can. Exercise 2. Say mentally, I am more positive than you. I am outgazing you, throwing as much positivity as possible into your gaze, the same being inspired, of course, by our feeling. Exercise 3. Say, and feel, you are afraid of me, I am making you feel my strength, throwing the feeling into your gaze. In speaking to persons and requesting them to do something, you should accompany the verbal request by a mental command. For instance, if you say you will do this for me, won't you? This is the suggestive form of questioning. Remember, you should accompany the question with the command, made mentally, with the proper glance. You shall do this. If you are the person requested to do something that you do not wish to do, you should answer, no, I do not care to do this, or I do not see my way clear to do it, or I am unable to oblige you, etc., etc. But at the same time you must send the mental answer, with its accompanying glance, I will not do it, and you cannot make me. A well-known teacher along these lines several years ago taught his pupils to gaze into the eyes of persons whom they wished to affect, at the same time saying mentally, I am looking at you. I am looking through your eyes into your brain. My willpower is stronger than yours. You are under my control. I will compel you to do what I wish. You must do what I say. You shall do this. Do it at once. It will readily be seen that this will generate a powerful mentative current, if there is a sufficiently strong feeling, will and desire, behind it. But right here I shall give you an antidote for this kind of influence. You should say mentally, accompanying it with the proper glance, with feeling back of it, I deny positively your power over me. I deny it out of existence. I will not do your bidding, and I deny your right and power to command me. I deny your power, and I affirm my own. You may cultivate this power to use the positive denial by practicing on an imaginary person whom you may suppose is trying to influence you. Imagine the strong, positive person before you, trying to influence you, and then start to practice the positive denial on him, until you feel that you have beaten him off, and have sent him flying away in retreat. These imaginary mental battles will develop a great power of mentative resistance in you, and I advise you strengthen yourselves along these lines. If you feel that you are weak, you may improve on the above exercise by imagining that after your enemy is in full retreat you follow him up and pour statement after statement into him, changing your position from a defender into an attacking force. These imaginary rehearsals will do more for one than people think possible. They are like stage rehearsals that make perfect the actors. They are the fencing lessons from which the swordsman gains skill and strength. Practice, practice, practice makes perfect in everything, in mentative work as well as physical. In the degree that you see and feel, the thoughts that you are expressing in words will be the degree of impression made upon, and mentative induction produced in, the other person. The secret, of course, lies in the power of visualization. Practice, you may find an evidence of your increasing mentative influence by trying the psychological experiment of willing people to move this way or that way, by gazing intently at them. In this experiment it is not necessary for you to gaze into their eyes. Gazing at their back, preferably at the upper part of the neck, at the base of the brain, will answer. You may try willing persons to look around on the street, or in public places, etc., or you may will that they turn to the right or left of you, when approaching each other on the street. Or, in stores you may will that a certain clerk, from out of a number, will step forward to wait upon you. These and many similar experiments have an interest to the majority of students, and are accomplished with comparative ease, after sufficient practice. The whole theory and practice consists of a steady gaze, and the mental command, and will, that the person will act so and so, together with the earnest expectation that he will obey the command, and the mental picture of his doing so. That is all there is to it. When you shake hands with a person, throw mind and feeling into it, and do not fall into the mechanical, lifeless method so common among people. 1. Mental states may be caused by mentative induction. 2. Such induced mental states may be caused by the mentative currents of personal magnetism, or by the mentative currents of telementation, or by mental suggestion. 3. Mentative currents are waves or streams of vibrant mind power, emanating from the minds of people, and carrying with them the vibrations of mental states, the vibrations tending to induce similar mental states in the minds of people within the field of induction. B. There are two poles of mind power, i.e., the emotive pole, manifesting desire, feeling, emotion, etc., and the motive pole, manifesting will, etc. The acting force, affecting other minds, manifested by these two poles being called desire force and willpower, respectively. See, desire force tends to awaken similar vibrations in the minds of others, thus producing similar desires, or it charms the wills of others and causes them to carry out its desires, its action and nature bearing a strong resemblance to feminine mental power. D. Willpower tends to awaken desire in the minds of others by sheer mastery and forcefulness. It also acts in the direction of combating and overpowering the wills of others, and taking them captive. It also directs, masters, concentrates, or restrains one's own desire force. On occasions, its action bears a strong resemblance to masculine mental power. E. When the mentative currents are emanated, and mentative induction is manifested, when the projector and recipients are in the personal presence of each other, we use the term personal magnetism. When the same manifestation occurs when the projector and recipients are not in the personal presence of each other, then we use the term telementative induction. But the principle employed is the same in each case, induction through telementation being the operative principle. In personal magnetism, however, mental suggestion usually assists in the induction of mental states. For this reason, mental suggestion should be studied in connection with personal magnetism, being supplementary thereto. 4. Mental suggestion induces mental states, by reproducing the original mental states of others, or one's own previously experienced mental states, including the experience of the race ancestors, inherited and recorded in the subconscious minds of their descendants. Suggestion operates along the lines of acquiescence, imitation, association, and repetition, always acting through physical agents for inducing mental states. In personal magnetism, the mentator pours out his mentative currents, generated by his will or desire, or both, either in a general way, or in a concentrated, directed manner, in a personal interview, and thus influences the mind of others by induction. This is usually, or always, accompanied by mental suggestion, using physical agents, such as the voice, eye, manner, etc., which heighten the effect produced. I feel that no one can be a successful practitioner of telementative influence or personal magnetism who is not a good suggestionist, because the very knack of projecting strong suggestions is necessary for the forceful projection of mentative energy and mental currents. It is true that the practitioner of mental suggestion, in his treatments, often makes use of direct, forceful statements, such as, "You are strong, cheerful, well and happy," but you will notice even here that he does not argue the point, or attempt to prove his statements. He simply affirms and asserts the fact, and by constantly repeated suggestions he finally causes the mind of the other person to accept the statement. Suggestion through repetition, constant dripping will wear away the hardest stone. Familiarity breeds contempt. And also lack of caution. Suggestion gains force by each repetition. This is one of the fundamental laws of suggestion, and one that all should remember. Children are quite amenable to suggestion of this sort, being natural imitators, and they soon take on the mental attitude of the parent toward them. If the parent treats the child as being beyond control, the child will respond. If the child be considered obstinate, etc., he will take on the suggestion, and the original trouble will be magnified. People talk before their children, little realizing that the little minds are very suggestible, and are constantly taking suggestive color from those around them. People should endeavor to present to their children only the best, positive, helpful, uplifting, and encouraging mental states. They should avoid giving the child the impression that it is bad, or mean, or deceitful, or shy, or anything of that sort. The child will be apt to accept the suggestion coming from a source that it naturally looks to for information, and it will be very apt to proceed to act upon the suggestion and make the words of the parent come true. Suggestion by authority and repetition. Remember, that's what does the business for you. They call this the direct command in the advertising schools. 1. Attention. 2. Interest. 3. Desire. 4. Sale. These are the steps of salesmanship by suggestion, and advertising sales as well. Great is suggestion in business. I have known salesmen to gently suggest the closing of a sale by handing the customer a fountain pen, placed at the suggestive slant, at the same time pointing to the space on the order blank, with the take it for granted tone and utterance, "Sign right here, please." And it was signed. This is taught in the courses and schools of advertising, and the ad men are well grounded on the subject. The use of the direct command, as the ad men call it, is very common. People are positively told to do certain things in these advertisements. They are told to take home a cake of Hinky Dink soap tonight. Your wife needs it. And then you are told that some cigar is generously liberal in size and quality, or that some kind of cocoa is grateful and refreshing, or that some brand of soap is 99.999% pure, and that some pickle man makes 763 varieties, etc., etc., etc. Only last night I saw a new one. Somebody's whiskey is smooth, and every imbiber in the car was smacking his lips and thinking about the smooth feeling in his mouth and throat. It was smooth, the idea, not the stuff, I mean. A writer on the psychology of advertising advises, among other things, that advertisements of articles to eat or drink should contain the words calculated to induce the feeling of taste in the minds of the readers. Sweet, refreshing, thirst-quenching, nourishing, etc., etc. How suggestive they are. And how effective. How do they act? You ask. How? Well, this way. Just you read these words, a nice, big juicy lemon, tart and strong, I can taste it now. Just imagine these words accompanied by a picture of a man squeezing the juice of a lemon into his mouth. And where are you? I'll tell you where. Your mouth is filled with saliva, from the imagined taste of the tart lemon juice. Now, isn't it? I have known of dealers in spring goods to force the season by filling their windows with the advance stock. I have seen hat dealers start up the straw hat season by putting on a straw themselves, their clerks ditto, and then a few friends. The sprinkling of straws gave the suggestion to the street, and the straw hat season was opened. Businessmen understand suggestion. Even the newsboys understand it. The best ones are above asking as the novices do, "Want a paper, mister?" Or worse still, "You don't want a paper, mister, do you?" The good ones say, Instead, boldly and confidently, "Here's your paper, mister." Sticking it under your nose, and you take it. It is calculated to lead one into acquiescence, for man is an obedient animal, and it is so much easier to say yes than no, when you see that yes is expected. I have heard of businessmen who would instruct their clerks to ask questions of their customers in this way: "You like this pattern, do you not? Or this is a beautiful shade, is it not? Etc., etc., etc. Do you see the point? The statement is made first, and the question is asked right on top of it. Isn't it easier to say yes than no to this kind of a question? In this connection I may add that it is a well-known psychological fact that, when two persons are conversing, the one standing, or sitting higher than the other, has the advantage of a certain positive attitude or position, and the person seated below the speaker is forced into a relatively passive or negative condition, or position. That is, everything else being equal, the person elevated will be positive to the other, and the one seated on a lower level will be passive, relatively. The raised platform of the teacher, speaker, preacher, etc., is a good psychological basis. And the power that a lawyer feels when talking on his feet to the jury seated in front of him is a manifestation of a law that he may not be aware of, but the judge has the best of the lawyer, for the latter must look up to him when he talks. Try the experiment of practicing the above position with some friend, first one being seated and then the other, and see how you can actually feel the difference between the two positions. Many foolish suggestions are given in everyday life along the lines of future suggestion, and alas, many of them are accepted carelessly, owing to a lack of knowledge of the principle. How many times has it been said to an impressionable young bride, "Never mind, you'll grow tired of him after a while," etc., or to a man, "Wait until the novelty wears off and you'll see how sick of the job you'll get," or, "You'll lose your interest and enthusiasm by and by," or, "You'll find him out after a while and will see that he's not what he seems." You make up your mind that you must awaken to catch a train at 4 tomorrow morning, and you awaken in time. You have set your mental alarm clock. If you have an engagement at 3 this afternoon, you may set your alarm as follows, talking to yourself, "Of course. Now, see here. Remember that you must see Smith at 3 this afternoon. 3, I say. Remember now, 3, I say." And if you impress it sufficiently strong upon your mind, a little before 3 you will begin to feel uneasy, and then suddenly your Smith engagement will pop into your mind from your subconscious region, and you will reach out for your hat and overcoat. Mental alarm clock, remember. That tells the whole tale. Induced imagination. Imagination in its positive phase is a most important faculty of the human being. One must form a mental image of a thing before he can manifest it in objective form. Not only does it proceed, and is necessary to, the performance of objective acts, and the producing of material things, but it is also the faculty by which we impress our mental images upon the minds of others by mentative induction, and by the uses of desire and will. Positive imagination is the mother of ideas. An idea is but an image formed in the mind, and the imagination is the faculty in which the image, or idea, is formed. And in proportion to the activity of the imagination, so is the strength of the image or idea. And as is the strength of the image or idea, so is the degree of its power to impress itself upon the minds of others. Suggestion is merely the presentation of the outward symbol of the inner feeling. Practice. The following method is used by these Oriental magicians in developing within themselves the power to induce these strong mental images in the minds of those witnessing their performances. The magician starts when a youth and practices mental imagery in his own mind. This process is akin to visualization, as mentioned by me in other chapters of this work. The magician at first uses his will in an endeavor to form a clear and distinct mental image of some familiar object. A rose, for instance. He practices until he is able to actually see the thing before him in his mind's eye. Then he experiments upon larger objects, and then upon groups of objects, and so on to more complex pictures. After years of constant experimentation and practice, a few of those undertaking the work find themselves able to picture any of the scene, that is, they are able to clearly picture them in their own minds. And this being accomplished, the magician is able by his highly developed concentrated will to project the mental image into the mind of those around him. It is induced imagination raised to a high degree of manifestation. Remember this, everything has its mental apparatus, even down to the atom, and the particles that compose atoms. Everything feels and responds to feeling, even among the most material forms, and everything that feels and responds, must manifest desire and will, if only in an elementary way, and must have mental apparatus in order to do this. There is mind, and the machinery of mind, in every atom, and all that is evolved therefrom. 1. Direct telementation. In this form of telementation, the mentator usually concentrates upon the person or thing that he wishes to affect, and then consciously, and by the use of his will, he sends to that person or thing a current or currents of desire force or willpower, or both. It is known to occultists that the degree of effect so produced depends largely upon the degree of concentration employed by the mentator. The degree of concentration depends upon the will, and is manifested in the form of attention. The usual plan is to use the concentrated will to form a clear mental image of the person or thing to be affected, and then to proceed as if one were in the actual presence of the person. The clearer the image, the greater the degree of concentrated will employed, and consequently the greater the degree of the projecting power of the current. The treatments for good things practiced by the practitioners of the various schools of mental science, and other new thought people are along the lines of direct telementation. The mentator forms the mental image of the other person, and then floods him with currents of desire force, or willpower, or both, at the same time earnestly willing and desiring that he will do as the mentator wishes him to do. The mentator usually uses his will to make the other do this in the mental picture, in imagination, thus forming a mental matrix, to which he then tries to make the other conform. This is a form of visualization, of which I shall speak presently. Of course, this practice, like any other of the kind, may be defeated by one asserting his individuality and will. 2. Direct telementation at distance. The person wishing to influence another at a distance, just as he would in the case of a personal interview, forms a mental image of the person whom he wishes to influence, and then proceeds just as if the person was actually before him. I know of at least one teacher who advises his students to treat prospective customers, and others with whom they expect to have dealings, or relations, as follows. Imagine your prospective customer, or other person, as seated in a chair before which you are standing. Make the imagined picture as strong as possible, for upon this depends your success. Then proceed to treat the person just as you would if he were actually present. Concentrate your will upon him, and tell him just what you expect to tell him when you meet him. Use all of the arguments that you can think of, and at the same time hold the thought that he must do as you say. Try to imagine him as complying with your wishes, in every respect, for this imagining will tend to come true when you really meet the person. This rule may be used, not only in the case of prospective customers, but also in the cases of persons whom you wish to influence in any way whatsoever. 2. Guard yourself from acting upon impulses. 3. Cultivate the picture and idea of a positive aura, and always think of yourself as being encased in such a one. See yourself as a strong positive center of power, encased in an impregnable sheath of auric force. The positive always overcomes the negative, and optimistic mental states are always positive to pessimistic mental states. I now come to a phase of the subject that underlies all of the phenomena of telementation, and really gives the key to much of its wonderful effects. I allude to what occultists know as visualization. This visualization is to telementation what the pattern is to the maker of objects, what the plans of the architect are to the builders, what the mold or matrix is to molders of metal. It is the skeleton around which the materialization of thought forms occurs. It is of the greatest importance to you to acquaint yourselves with its laws and effects. To visualize means to see mentally, that is, to form a mental image of a thing, to see it in one's mind, etc. The men who obtain the greatest and most wonderful results through mentative influence, particularly in the form of telementation, are those men who are able to visualize most clearly the things that they wish to materialize, who are able to form the mental image of the things they wish to manifest. The secret of visualization lies in the occult and psychological principle that as is the mental matrix, so is the mental form, and as is the mental form, so is the physical materialization. In other words, the visualized mental image is the matrix or mold into which the mind power is poured, and from which it takes form, and around this mental image the deposit of materialization forms, and thus does the ideal become the real. If you wish to get the best effects from mind power, you must create a mental image around which the material or physical materialization is formed, and the way to form the proper mental image is by visualization, which thus builds up the matrix or mold in which the mind power pours. And as is the matrix, so is the image, and as is the image, so is the materialization. Then you must hold this mental image before you constantly, regarding it not as a mere imagination, but as a something real which you have created in your mind, and which will proceed to surround itself with the material necessary to give it material objectivity, or materialization. You must pour into that mental image a constant supply of strong, positive desire force, and willpower, all of which will spread out in the proper directions and affect the material needed to materialize your mental image. By so doing you impart to the mentative currents